Hello, you wonderful people. So as you can tell from the title of this video, I'm going to talk about some of the new Marvel news that got dropped at D23. First of all, we're going to talk about the 3 new Disney Plus shows that we're getting when it comes to Marvel stuff, which is crazy. Just got all this stuff from slated from Phase 4, and now we're getting even more, which is crazy. First, we're getting I don't know if there's any particular order, based on the article I read, but obviously one of those said heroes is Miss Marvel. Obviously, a hero I'm not that familiar with at all, like most Marvel characters in general, but it was kind of interesting reading up about her. I knew a little bit about her because obviously she's popped up in some stuff. Interesting enough, the new Ultimate Alliance Marvel game that came out on the Nintendo Switch, obviously she's one of the characters in that. Also, based on the gameplay trailer that came out for the Square Enix Marvel's Avengers game, she's also going to be in that too, which is interesting. Like, the time is kind of interesting on that front. Like I said, I don't know that much about her. I looked into her a little bit. Like, I knew a little bits about her power, but I wasn't sure. I'm still not sure what the full scope of it is. Apparently her powers is kind of labeled as shape-shifting. Now, what that entails, like, from what I can tell, she kind of almost has like a Mr. Fantastic type of situation where like she can like extend her arms and like kind of grow them almost like mallet size or whatever. Like I don't know, but I don't know how far along her shape-shifting goes to the point she can like change how she looks type of shape-shifting, or is it just kind of like the aspects of her body she can shape-shift? You know what I'm trying to say? I'm curious about that. What I also thought was kind of interesting is I was curious where her name came from, and it turns out it's because she's a huge Captain Marvel fan, which I'm like, oh dude, that's dope. Obviously this is the perfect time considering the fact this Captain Marvel has been established in the MCU. What I also think is interesting though is I'm curious to see how they incorporate that, because Captain Marvel hasn't been at the forefront of like people's minds. So, like, she's a hero that most people aren't aware of exists. She's not like a household name like the original Avengers. There's other characters like, Ant-Man. I know you know Ant-Man. Like, that type of situation. I think Captain Marvel kind of falls into that category. But part of me wonders, is it going to be like, she's like a young girl and like, oh, she's fanning, like everyone's fanning out about like, oh my God, the Avengers. And then maybe she'll be the one person like, yeah, Captain Marvel's dope. And you're like, who? It's like, wait, you guys don't know about who Captain Marvel is? Because it might be because the way her story is currently set up, she hasn't been around for like the past 20 plus years. So not unless it's supposed to represent the fact is after Endgame she kind of pops back in and around on Earth, and maybe that could be how Miss Marvel finds out about her. So, oh my God, Captain Marvel is like the best. I'm curious, is that the direction they'd go? I think that'd be kind of a neat way to kind of tie that in. But I also thought was kind of interesting is finding out she's an Inhuman, which I had no idea, which is interesting because, obviously because the Disney Plus shows are going to influence the MCU more directly than previous Marvel TV shows have. That means she might be the first Inhuman to hit the big screen, because like amongst the shows they announced, like this is going to be like, she's definitely going to be in the movies at some point. So I think that's pretty interesting. Maybe they're circling back to setting up the Inhumans inside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is interesting because sadly, that put that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. situation in a weird place, because it's like, obviously because now it's kind of like all the other Marvel Cinematic Universe TV shows technically aren't canonical anymore, which is interesting considering the fact that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has the deepest connection, that being S.H.I.E.L.D. and Coulson. But for that not to be the case anymore, and let's not forget like 2 of the main characters in that show, that being Daisy and Yo-Yo, are Inhumans, so it's like, are you going to discount that as well? I mean, Inhumans have been set up in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. since Season 2. Season 2's finale made it a much more widespread thing being an Inhuman. They had a whole caveat of how the whole Inhuman thing worked and how it kind of spread. And obviously, if you're fish oil, if you're caught up with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., like I said, this was like a Season 2/Season 3 thing. But is that going to be how she became an Inhuman, or is that something they're going to tackle at all? Or are they going to rebooting the Inhuman thing with her introduction? Maybe by then Inhumans will be set up in the MCU more directly, even though they kind of already exist because of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. thing, which like it's a whole complicated mess of like how, I'm curious how they're going to handle that. Another hero they set up is Moon Knight, another hero I'm not familiar with. I'm very interested in this character. Obviously, comparisons, you know, I know it might be blasphemous for most people, but obviously the comparison that constantly gets made, and I think it has always been made about this character, is the comparison to Batman. Apparently, he's like an ex-military dude. He's kind of like got superhuman abilities and agilities. Well, I thought what's kind of interesting though is his powers is tied to the phases of the moon. So I think depending, probably like a full moon, he's probably at his strongest, which I think is going to be an interesting element to kind of tackle with, like where it's like, oh man, like I better be careful who I'm fighting because I'm not at my full strength because like the moon's only at a quarter moon or whatever, or it's a lunar moon, you know, whatever the case may be. I think that's an interesting element to kind of decide like how strong he, like how varying his abilities can be. But I do like, because obviously like the way he is, like it seems like, you know, this coming from someone who doesn't know the character, it seems like it could be kind of like, you could get a little bit of like a Daredevil kind of Black Widow type of thing of him, you know, obviously being all detective-ish, but like we could expect probably some like Daredevil level action. I think would be pretty dope. I'd be so curious to see how that all gets handled, because I was also interested to learn that basically his powers come from like an Egyptian god. He's like the avatar to some Egyptian god or something. So it's like, okay, that's interesting. Bringing that like mythology into the MCU would be pretty dope. And then the other character that we're getting is She-Hulk is getting her own show, which is pretty dope. Another character I'm not familiar with at all, and I knew she had a connection to Bruce Banner, but I didn't remember that being his cousin. I knew about the whole her being a lawyer thing, but from what I was reading, and maybe this is something they changed in the continuities, but basically she needed like a transplant, and the only donor available was Bruce, because obviously they're family, so there's connection there. So, and because of that, like the gamma radiation stuff in his genes got passed to her, and she becomes She-Hulk. Obviously she's not like, she gets, I think, bigger, but she's not like as like bulky as a Hulk, but she still has like the same abilities as him, but like on a little bit of a lesser scale. And I don't, from what I was seeing, I don't know if she doesn't necessarily goes down the same route that Bruce does. Like the angrier she gets, the more powerful she gets. I don't know if that's something they really 100% tackle in the MCU anyway. Like the Hulk is just a Hulk, but it does seem like the angrier he gets, he kind of gets a leg up in a fight. But I'm curious to see how they handle that whole situation. It's interesting because she could be like one of those, well, I think her, Moon Knight, and Miss Marvel could all bring that element that Spider-Man brought to the MCU of like secret identities. That might be something that we see kind of tackled with these three different characters. I think would be pretty dope. Also, we're getting a lawyer in the MCU, which, yes, there was Daredevil before, but technically that's not continuity. It would be nice if we could get like some references here and there where she's just like, oh yeah, like, oh, you heard about Matt? Yeah, Nelson and Murdoch, make references like that. It'd be neat to even get her just to even talk about, you know, even run into Matt Murdock. It'd be interesting because like by then, that whole little 2-year gap that's supposed to happen between like Marvel and Netflix, like Marvel can't do anything with those characters or properties for the next 2 years because of that whole situation. So I'm curious, is that going to be something that they, by the time the She-Hulk show comes out, will that be something they're allowed to do or not? I don't know. I'm also curious to find out how they handle this whole thing. Like, would her story have been set up during during what we now know as the blip, that 5-year period, you know, that 5-year time skip? Like, is that going to be her whole thing? Is that actually how she becomes She-Hulk? Because I'm curious if that's going to be something that happens like, oh, it's after all the events of the Endgame, and it's like, oh, then the whole thing happens. Well, it'd be an interesting time considering the fact is where Bruce is right now, being Professor Hulk. I'd be so curious to see if that's like how they end up handling. I think it would probably make more sense to potentially do that in a 5-year gap, but I mean, who's to say they don't find another way around it? It'd be interesting seeing like Hulk being there and being like, oh yeah, I got a transplant, you know, to help out my cousin or whatever. I think that'd be pretty dope and funny on its own right, but like I said, I'm interested to see how they would handle it. Like I said, it'd be dope to have a lawyer in the MCU kind of representing superheroes like that. That'd just be kind of dope because like, that's kind of her thing. It was even interesting from one thing I was reading was like she represented Morbius at one point in the comic books after he was kind of on trial for all those stuff he did as a vampire. That was kind of interesting. Just, you know, so stuff like that would be kind of interesting to kind of, I think we could probably get our first like law show within the MCU. It's like, oh yeah, lawyer by day, superhero also by day and night. You know, that'd be such an interesting aspect to it. I think would be kind of pretty dope to bring something new to the table when it comes to like everything Marvel related. In the comments down below, let me know some of your thoughts. What are your thoughts about these new shows that are announced for Disney Plus? Which ones are you more excited for? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.